Service learning is kind of evolved out of a combination of project-based instruction and community service in schools. Most all of the schools in California and across the United States provide opportunities for students to volunteer through their school. For example, they may do a canned food drive in the elementary grades, or in high school they may go out and clean up parks or clean up a river, for example. And so that's an example of volunteerism, but it's not linked back to the curriculum. Project-based learning is where students do projects to learn the academic content and to learn about other issues in their community, for example, if it's a community-based project. But project-based learning doesn't necessarily mean that there's going to be any service associated with it. So service learning takes advantage of the volunteerism and the project to make learning come alive for students. So there's service and learning. And so from the educator's perspective, we use the service as a context for teaching. There's many contexts that we have in schools. As a biology teacher, I do laboratory experiments. I do multimedia presentations. I bring people in to talk about certain things. And so that was the context for the learning. With service learning, the context is that volunteer opportunity. So in the case of the students doing a canned food drive in the elementary grades, what they would do there is they would collect the cans, but the teacher would tie it back to their mathematics curriculum. For example, in 4th grade, they're supposed to learn about bar graphing. So as part of their math curriculum, they would bar graph how they're doing on their canned food drive. And as far as their English language arts curriculum, they would tie it back to that because they'd write about how they were doing on their canned food drive to report to the school, to the district, or do a public relations campaign. So for service learning, we tie that service is the context for the learning. The creek cleanup or the park cleanup project, we could convert that into a service learning activity as well. Because in the creek cleanup, for example, the kids could monitor the water quality. They could determine how much vegetation needed to be planted, the kind of vegetation that would be planted, and be tied back to their science curriculum. So those are kind of an example of a little difference. I think the key differences between service learning and volunteerism and other types of experiential opportunities is the impact it has on students. In service learning, we focus on 3 main areas of impacts. Impacts on students, impacts on the school and the culture, and impacts on the community. So when service learning is done well, it impacts all 3 of those. I think, you know, it brings me back to my biology classroom 20 some odd years ago, where Lamont was sitting in my classroom watching me do a lecture, and I had just finished a real stimulating lecture on how hydra have pneumatocysts, which probably nobody out there really knows anything about. And neither did Lamont. But at the end of the lecture, Lamont had some idea what I was talking about, and he called me over and said, "Mr. Bruce, straight up, why do I need to learn this and when will I ever use it?" And he was right in asking that, because quite frankly, there was very little use for that information for him. And so as an educator, my job is to make the curriculum connect to my students, and my students connect to that curriculum. So in the case of the creek cleanup that we talked about, what's in it for the students? It's meaningful learning for them. That creek cleanup, the students would use the hydra as an indicator species as to whether the health of the creek was very good. So students benefit from this not only in the academic sense, is that they're provided with an opportunity to learn the core curriculum in the way that best meets their learning styles, but it also provides them an opportunity to advance their critical thinking skills. Critical thinking skills of making sense, being innovative, working with other people is another important skill. I think the most important piece of service learning that really creates all these benefits for students is the meaningful connection the students have to the curriculum, to the teacher, to their school, and their community. It creates a very rich learning environment for them. I think the message that I can bring to Spain is that it is a global community. We do have the same issues in California as you do in Spain and across the United States. And together, I think we can solve some of these problems. In education, our students can work together. I've been talking with folks here a little bit about how we can do some global service projects together. Identifying schools here in Madrid that will be able to connect with schools in California. And look at their creeks here. And we can do creek cleanups and we can do creek monitoring together. We can look at issues in our community around homelessness. One that we're going to work on, I hope, is volunteering a project where students gather jeans for homeless people, and they donate them. Jeans for Good's the program, and I'm going to work on trying to bring that program, and kids can collaborate between the two countries on that. So my message to Spain is that students in Spain have the same issues and needs as students in California and students around the globe. They want their learning to be real, and they want it to be meaningful. And in this day and age of technology and instant access to everything, we have to make our curriculum designed to meet those type of needs and issues.